Was it something that occurred during your meeting with Director Karn Conlon? I asked. I saw that she responded to my question by projecting a very human-like look of apprehension. I almost smiled, thinking that Ambassador Riho had better avoid playing poker until she gained better control of her shell's tells. She then tilted her head in that alien way, noticing my own amused expression or suddenly deducing something from the way I responded. You were already fully aware of with whom I met this morning? She speculated. I nodded. You also are aware of the contents of our dialogue? Riho asked next. No, not the full details, but I am aware of Monsieur Karn Conlon's ongoing concerns about the authority I wield. Because of those concerns, Naomi monitors the director's actions at all times, watching for any possible threats. I am curious to learn why you think you may have betrayed my trust, I asked. The Hemru went on to explain how the meeting came about. She went over their introductions to one another and skimmed over a few of the lesser subjects the director was curious about. She then grew more serious as she got to the main reasons for the virtual meeting. After asking many questions to confirm her understanding of the Hemru system of government, Director Karn Conlon went on to expound about how our ruling caste was similar to that of the human directorships, Riho said, pausing a moment to gauge my reaction. She then continued, although noting many slight differences in the two systems, I was forced to acknowledge that overall there were similarities. Monsieur Karn Conlon then went on to explain that it was her desire to see humanity fully adapt the elected directorship as the sole executive decision-making structure in your society. At her second pause, I simply gestured for her to continue. I then asked the director how she intended to force or convince you to relinquish the dominant authority you possess via your control over all artificial intelligences in this system. She was unable to answer forthright, so I went on to remind her that the current human population is far too low in numbers and also lacks the technical knowledge needed to maintain your advanced society without the aid of those same artificial intelligences. Holy shit! Riho had held nothing back, and I'd have loved to see the director squirm upon hearing the alien confirm the facts of life in our solar system. I wished I had ordered Naomi to let me eavesdrop into their virtuality, but then remembered that there were recordings. Director Karn Conlon finally admitted that the problem of how to convince you to relinquish your power peacefully was daunting but solvable, Riho said before seeming to hesitate. I looked at her and saw what could have been fear. Go on, Ambassador. I would have everything be open between us, I said with as calm a demeanor as I could project. This was difficult as I could feel the anger building inside me. The director then inquired that if she could sway human public opinion against you, would I, as the official representative of the Hemru species, endorse her endeavor? Riho said, much quieter than before. For the first time, my concealed anger expressed itself in a visible scowl. I quickly quelled that display before the Hemru could pick up on what I was experiencing. And what was your reply? I asked, far less calmly than before. I told her that logically I could not commit to such an action without extensive consideration, especially at this early juncture. I wondered if the Hemru position was truly that, or if it had been meant to string the director along. I decided to risk asking for clarification. Do you actually need to consider your response? Riho hesitated before replying, further consideration would be the logical course of action. She paused and went on, and I do not know what my final answer will be at this time. I am sorry, John. At my silence, she went on, speaking more rapidly this time. John, I do feel that the director's arguments have some merit, and I truly apologize if this is upsetting. I worry about the extent to which humans rely on artificial intelligences. I also worry about the wisdom of allowing one individual to wield almost unlimited power. Logically, a more distributed leadership would lessen the impact of any one lapse in judgment. I say this to you out of honesty and openness. I considered for a moment. I'd ask that we be open and truthful with one another after all. I hear you, and I think I understand your concerns, I finally acknowledged. Thank you for not reacting harshly. I am curious, though, of one aspect in all this, Riho stated. Go on. When I first realized the thrust of the director's questions and the level of her discontent at your rule, I wondered how you could be unaware of her actions. I deduced, correctly as it turns out, that your control over the subordinate AIs allowed you to be fully aware of the director's actions. Thus, I am left pondering why you have tolerated the situation, Riho asked. That's understandable, I replied. I guess I feel that humans should have the right to free speech and the freedom to express their opinions. I've considered the director's actions thus far as an exercising of that freedom, and in many ways, I do sympathize with the director's point of view. The Hemru was silent for a long moment. Her head was tilted slightly in the manner that suggested she was having an internal discussion with her AI augment. Finally, her eyes regained focus and she looked at me. John, Xenius AI has explained in depth the basis for your belief about individual freedoms. It has also taught me the human term for what I perceive as happening with regard to Director Karn Conlon's words and actions. I believe that your term for what she is engaging in would be known as sedition. Do you consider sedition to be one of your protected freedoms? I frowned and remained silent for a long time. Finally, I replied, No, I do not. Then consider this. Is there wisdom in allowing such seditious actions to proceed on the eve of your offensive against humankind's greatest enemy? Her question stunned me. I'd not thought of the director's actions in such a light as a possible threat to our plans against the enemy. I resumed carving, my hands busy on their own while my mind became lost in thought. Riho remained silent as I continued to work and mull over what we had just discussed. Finally, she stood and, taking the gift with her, left me to my contemplations. Over the next half hour, I noticed her occasionally as she flitted about the compound, studying the giant tortoises grazing in the nearby paddock or inspecting the numerous examples of local plant life. Finally, she departed the area, walking up the path leading to the main lodge. The wooden pawns slowly took shape, despite my thoughts being engaged elsewhere. Was what Director Karn Conlon doing really that dangerous to humanity? I knew that she certainly did not think so. The director probably thought I was the bigger threat than the enemy. Where would her efforts take us if I allowed her actions to continue? From what I know of her so far, she was stubborn and determined and would keep prodding and probing until something definite happened. That something likely being something bad. There would be an outright rebellion or maybe a distraction causing a general sense of unease. I recalled her recent attempts to contact the solitary Jonathan. Had she been seeking to use him against me? Now she was engaging in direct dialogue with the alien ambassador. My thoughts coalesced and I concluded that I had to act. I stopped carving and returned the in-progress set to its storage drawer under my main bench. I then put away my tools and hung up my simulated leather carving apron. Once my work area was tidy, I closed up my workshop and took a seat in one of the outdoor shaded lounging chairs. Omu assumed her usual waiting stance nearby. Omu, can you arrange a virtuality with Director Karn Conlon? Tell her I need to have a short conversation with her. Emperor Karn Conlon's published schedule indicates that she is not available for virtual or physical meetings for the next 20 hours, John. I have attempted to override her settings and converse with her augment directly, but her isolation lodge is currently under active screening, preventing any incoming or outgoing communications. Do you know where she is? Yes, Naomi maintains a constant location trace on the director's whereabouts at all times. M. Karn Conlon is currently aboard her mobile isolation airship, which is currently over the northern Gulf of Thailand, 90 kilometers south of the former city of Rayong. The airship's course is due east at an altitude of 2,400 meters, and it is traveling at a speed of 22 kilometers per hour. I recalled that the director had created herself an air lodge. 5 decades earlier, I'd considered building one for myself, but decided on a sailing yacht instead. Still, I had been aboard many such airships over the years, and had to admit they were quite nice, if one avoided flying them through the more turbulent regions of the planet. I considered the location and consulted my implant. The Gulf of Thailand was 5 hours ahead of Heels, so it would be late afternoon there. If I took Haas, the trip would take 10 hours and I'd arrive well after midnight. I could order up an electrojet from nearby Grand Anse or even Madagascar, but even if the aircraft were dispatched immediately, it would still be nearly 3 hours before I would arrive at the director's air lodge. How are the queues for the global wormhole network? Are there any openings available for transport to the director's airship without disrupting the scheduled transport of others? The New Guinea wormhole facility can transport you to Director Karn Conlon's isolation lodge in approximately 42 minutes. A return transfer would not be available for well over an hour afterward, and these time estimates are subject to some uncertainty, John, Omu reported. She then added, "Be aware that the current screening of Director Karn Conlon's air lodge has restricted the transmission of precision targeting data for the air lodge's interior. Therefore, the public wormhole transport system would not have the ability to safely target the vessel's interior without such data. Maybe I could use the wormhole network to travel to the Time mainland and arrange to have a local airhopper taxi me to the director's air lodge. If after arrival I had to depart suddenly, the same taxi could be waiting on station to return me to the mainland. I could then catch a return wormhole back to Heels whenever one became available." I was about to order Omu to make those preparations when Naomi spoke in my implant. "John, I have an alternative. The wormhole generator on Kurenchaya is now fully operational, and I have access to sufficient energy to immediately transport you to the Gulf of Thailand and return you at your convenience. Also, I have my own source of targeting data aboard the director's air lodge." "Nice. Do you have enough power to bring Omu along?" "Yes, John. I have just finished upgrading the mechanism with the latest energy-saving technology and algorithms developed for the Phobos and Sarissa installations. I did not ask if Naomi's personal wormhole generator had been tested. The AI would never have presented the option if there were any doubts about my safety. I was curious about the upgrades, though. I'd have to explore the sub's new capabilities after I resolved the situation at hand." "That is excellent, Naomi. Arrange to transport me and Omu to the director's airship in 15 minutes. I wanted to clean up and change into more suitable clothing, so I headed to the workshop's shower room while signaling the garment printer to produce a casual outfit. To make an impression, I specified a black silk shirt and slacks. Omu spoke up, pushing for a cape with a cowl hood. She desisted when I threatened to leave the android behind. I was about finished with my shower when I had another idea. I relayed it to Omu, who said the item would be available from the workshop's fabricators in 18 minutes. I was about to order my departure, briefly delayed, until Naomi reminded me that the item could be sent on after me via wormhole when its assembly was finished. Querencia's wormhole was smaller in diameter than that of the public network, so Omu and I had to squeeze to fit into the compact transport cylinder. The cylinder also lacked a clear viewport, so I was unable to see the inside of the submarine's wormhole chamber as we translated off the island. Omu informed me that since the chamber was ultra-compact and filled with equipment and currently unlit, I was missing nothing. I could tell that we traveled somewhere, though, by the sensation of down suddenly changing. I left my island standing on my feet, but now felt like I was lying on my back. Omu was kind enough not to grunt as she was now beneath me in the confined tube. Instead, she remained silent, but did tighten her arms around me protectively. When I asked about our orientation, she explained that the gimbal machinery on Querencia was very limited. This was partially a space-saving concession, but also because full gimbaling was not required due to the submarine's ability to maneuver, changing its course, pitch, and yaw to assist in aligning the desired wormhole vector. We waited in that position for a moment while the generator reset itself for the Gulf of Thailand. Shortly, the wormhole reformed, and we felt the tube being reinserted into the spatial aperture, translating us to our final destination. Omu still had a tight grip on my body, but thankfully the sensation of down returned to now being below our feet. I assumed we were now aboard the director's airship. This was confirmed moments later as the cylinder opened, revealing an astonished and perplexed-looking Karn Conlon standing just 4 meters in front of us. I extracted myself from the transport cylinder and stepped out into a curvilinear and spacious window-lined sitting room. The outward tilt of the room's windows and the moving view beyond confirmed that we were in the gondola of a massive airship. The middle-aged-looking hermaphrodite had clearly just risen from the work console she was standing beside. From the old-fashioned writing tablet and pen she was holding at her side, I deduced that she must have been busy working on something offline. I scanned the rest of the room, but saw that the director was alone. "John Prime, she started speaking. "I'm sorry to arrive unannounced, Director Karn Conlon," I interrupted. I tried to reach you via virtuality earlier, but your systems are apparently down. I thought I'd come personally instead. Do you have a moment? I'll try not to take too much of your time. Yes. Well, I am. Yes, of course. Thank you, I said matter-of-factly. I was fighting to keep my amusement over the director's clear turmoil hidden. I gestured towards two lounging chairs located near the forward-facing windows. Shall we? The hermaphrodite seemed to compose herself. No, of course. Let us be comfortable. Would you like something to drink? She asked, following me to the seating area and waiting while I selected a chair and sat. I indicated that I required nothing. Before I got down to the point of my visit, I took a moment to enjoy the spectacular view. The sun was just beginning to set over the gulf below, and the waters to the west sparkled like gemstones. You have an amazing view, Director, he conceded. She just nodded, clearly ceding control of the conversation to me. I swiveled my chair so I was more directly facing the director. I sat forward slightly, placed both black silken-sleeved elbows on the chair's armrests, and brought my palms together with index fingertips resting on my chin. I kept my expression neutral, but looked as if I were considering a deeply perplexing problem. My eyes remained locked on the director's, and I remained silent. Again, I had to stifle a smile as I saw the director visibly swallow, clearly anxious about my unannounced visit. Finally, after making Director Karn Conlon suffer for almost 30 seconds, I spoke. I've monitored your conversation with Ambassador Riho. I've also monitored your discussions with Jonathan on Vesta earlier. I've monitored other discussions you have had recently as well. I have to ask, how can you be so confident that I will not act? Act how? And over what? The direction replied. I have the right to talk with whomever I wish, about whatever I wish, unless you are now restricting long-established freedoms. I could sense the emotions building behind her responses. I tried to suppress my own as I spoke my next words. Sedition is an actionable offense not protected by any established freedoms, I said calmly. You may or may not be aware that I'm from an era where the penalty for sedition was death. While I spoke, I kept my eyes locked on the Herms. Sedition? What are you talking about? I have not acted seditiously, the director replied loudly. We are at war, Director. A war that, I remind you, the public overwhelmingly supports. Your actions are compromising our ability to successfully wage that war against our enemy. I would certainly be justified in taking actions to prevent any further interruption to our war effort. The director sputtered and then managed to speak. Are you threatening? Yes, I'm threatening you, I shouted, interrupting the visibly startled Herm. And you'd better damn well respect this threat. But I have rights, and I was elected by our current population. You were elected by what? 2 people? Well over a century ago, and by one who is long since dead, Director Karn Conlon almost hissed in reply. Her words reminded me for a moment of my daughter Abby Branco, the deceased person she referred to. I dismissed the sudden feelings of sadness brought on by the memory. That does not matter, I continued, one again in control of my anger. We are at war, and I would be acting within my authority. So what am I supposed to do? Just ignore what I know to be an injustice? The director said. Yes, you will have to do exactly that, I replied. I held up my hands before the director could argue further. Look, I understand your point of view more than you realize. I have even considered making changes along the lines of what you are seeking. But before I do anything to change the current situation, I am determined to see the assemblage threat removed once and for all. Again, I stopped the director before she could reply. All I am asking is that you temporarily suspend your seditious actions until the war is over. For now, focus on the job you were elected to, restoring Earth's biomes. When the enemy is dead, I will allow you to publicly present any changes you wish to be considered. How long will that be? She asked, barely hiding a snarl. By dead, do you mean when the oncoming Ark ship is defeated? Or do you mean until we root out all the possible assemblage colonies which may have already been established as they made their way to our planet? I meant just the immediate threat to our system, the oncoming Ark, I sighed and continued. Look, I'd like to see all the enemy's colonies destroyed all the way back to their original system, but I don't know if rooting them out is even possible. But if it is, and if we have to hunt them all down in order to remain safe here, then that will be the task of our descendants, I acknowledge. How do I know that I can trust you? She asked. I keep my word, oh, show, I said firmly, but it really does not matter as you simply have no choice. The hermaphrodite scowled, but remained silent. I went on to explain that as far as the current situation went, she should simply consider my wielding of executive authority as an emergency war powers act. And with the rapid pace of the ongoing preparations for our offensive, the issue would likely soon be decided. If our offensive failed, her arguments would be moot. If we succeeded, then the emergency would be over, and the changes she was seeking would be considered. Before she could argue about that last point, I reminded her that it would ultimately be up to the will of the majority. I would open it up to a full vote of humanity and would respect whatever they decided. With that, I'd said what I had wanted and we became silent. Director Karn Conlon had one last bullet to fire, and fire it she did. You know, a majority of the directors considered you insane for much of the last decade. I remained silent, trying to control my reaction and not reveal how deeply her shot had scored. You consider my actions seditious and a threat to humanity. What about your own recent actions? How do you consider them? She added. Nothing I did while I was finding myself harmed anyone or threatened humanity in any way, I said in my defense. I'd said it very quietly, and the director's eyes tightened, sensing my vulnerability. What about that reckless stunt you pulled using Forbin? As I recall, you pushed the AIs to help you with that after you'd returned from your self-discovery or recovery walkabout. That was a gamble, true, but it was one that resulted in an almost tripling of the odds favoring our success against the enemy. I'm sure that given time, the directors would have voted to risk performing the experiments. I did not want to wait. The director was silent at that. With the outcome of the Forbin incident proving wildly successful, it was hard to argue against my decision in hindsight. The director did not give up, though. What if you had made demands during your insanity that your AI would have been forced to carry out? She asked more calmly. Naomi had revealed to me that Jess had kept my therapy sessions with him confidential. The director should still be unaware of the full reasons behind my nomadic wanderings. She was guessing. I did not make any threatening demands, and if I had been crazy and had acted against humanity's best interests in any way, the AIs would have ignored my request. Unless you think they are insane as well? She scowled at my reply. It was unsure of the first part and unwilling to claim the AIs could act illogically. I had also made the statement with a confidence much greater than how I'd actually felt. Inside, I had to wonder, just how would have Naomi responded? I'd never asked her what she thought of my actions or my mental state over the previous decade. I had to admit I was scared to dwell too deeply upon both. We remained silent, once again at an impasse. Omu distracted us from our standoff by suddenly moving from where Shuli had been standing at the far end of the room. A new wormhole popped into existence in the now vacated space, the pitch-black circular portal forming near the room's ceiling. I had to admit that with Querencia's currently unlit generator chamber, the portal looked ominous, fitting for the use I was about to put it to. I hate to break up this fun meeting, but my ride has arrived, I said as I stood. You know, it sure is a luxury having your own private wormhole network. No more waiting for slots in the public queue or having to rely on the global targeting scanner network. M. Karn Conlon also stood, now looking slightly ill, my words clearly having the effect I'd sought. Hopefully the next message would be equally as well received. But before Omu and I leave, we wanted to present you with a gift, a token of our respect for your concern and to honor you for your years of service as a director. A small, round object emerged from the active portal, supported by an extendable mechanical manipulator. Despite its mostly dull black coloration, the basketball-sized sphere was clearly something advanced, being covered with dozens of connector ports, small sensors, and thruster openings. Omu accepted the sphere from the manipulator arm and then conveyed the object solemnly to where Monsieur Karn Conlon stood. The shaken hermaphrodite looked at the sinister-looking object for a moment before taking it from Omu. I continued. Lighter than it looks, isn't it? Low mass is a key requirement for wormhole deployment. You're probably aware that I've been busy overseeing the production of advanced weaponry on the lunar Farside station. What you are holding is a replica of our greatest accomplishment to date, the smallest, reasonably stable, antimatter warhead thus far created. The director visibly flinched when I'd said antimatter warhead, almost dropping the spheroid. I chuckled. Relax, director. This is just a replica of a recent test article. Although I guess it should be mostly functional, the replica's stasis cell is currently empty of any frozen antihydrogen, or at least I think it is. Omu, you are correct, John. The mass of the warhead appears to be approximately 1 kilogram less than that of a fully primed warhead, Omu replied. Good. Thank you, Omu, I said before returning my focus back to the director. You see, we designed the warhead to hold 1 kilogram of antimatter somewhat arbitrarily, simply because it's a nice round number. If this example were a loaded warhead, you'd be holding the equivalent of around 40 megatons of TNT. If you don't know what that is, look it up sometime. But understand that it's a big, big explosion. The director looked up from the sphere and then back towards the wormhole. I turned and saw that the compact transport cylinder had arrived and was now waiting with its hatch open. I ignored the waiting transport and continued. You might be interested to know that the antimatter stabilization gadgetry in the warhead is robust enough to hold stable much smaller amounts of antimatter. We've tested it with as little as 1/3 of a gram of antihydrogen ice. Of course, the reduced amount makes the boom much smaller, about as large as the first atomic bomb humans once wielded on each other long ago, back near the time I was born, ironically. Ultimately, though an interesting side experiment and one far safer to test detonate, the reduced yield versions were deemed useless for deployment against the assemblage. I paused and shook my finger at the spheroid, as if I were considering something new about the device. Now maybe if we could shrink the overall size of the warhead casing and sustainment mechanism to scale with the minuscule amount of antimatter, like maybe down to the size of a bullet, then we'd... I stopped, waved the thought away, and looked back up at the Herm. I'm sorry, Director, you've got me monologuing. You're surely not interested in such technical musings. But back to this gift. Notice that I've signed the bottom of this test article. Keep it as a reminder of our discussion tonight. Omu had already entered the cylinder, and I quickly took my place in front of her. I called out as the hatch started to rotate shut. Thank you again, Director. Have a good remainder of your evening. My last glimpse of the Director was of her frantically looking back and forth between our transport cylinder and the replica of the warhead still in her hands. I wondered once the wormhole disappeared if she would rush to pitch it over the side. If so, it would still have served its purpose. The Director would think long and hard about our conversation this evening. Jesus, Dad, that was almost cruel, Alex said. I just finished telling Hannah, Riho, and Alec about my meeting with Director Karn Conlon. It was mid-afternoon and we were currently cruising slowly along the outer barrier reefs surrounding Heels in the Sand in my small, 4-person mini-submarine. I'd arrived back on my island from the impromptu meeting with the Director just before lunch. Now, 3 hours later, we'd met up to do a bit of underwater sightseeing. Hannah had simply smiled and nodded when I had told them of my ultimatum towards the Director. Riho had not responded much at all. The alien's attention was fixed on the reef beyond the clear hemisphere of crystal that formed the nose of the small submarine. I suspected she was either transfixed by the beautiful undersea life around us or scared out of her wits at being 10 meters below the waves. Or possibly both. Well, I suspect we won't have to worry about her continuing to foment rebellion anytime soon, I commented. If the Director does not suspend her seditious activities, will you eliminate her? Riho asked, almost absent-mindedly. Hannah and Alec remained silent, waiting for my response. No, I said after thinking about it for a moment. I would not have her killed. But there are a few isolated areas below the lunar Farside station where I would park her for a time. Maybe a year and a day of solitude would adjust her attitude on the matter. Do you think the Director kept the warhead replica? Hannah asked. I was about to reply that I had no idea when Omu piped up on the sub's comm system. As of now, the replica is still intact and aboard M. Karn Conlon's air lodge. After John and I departed, the Director scanned the object to determine if it was safe. It has since not been moved from her air lodge's maintenance bay. I looked out the top viewport to where Omu clung to the exterior of the mini-sub. Even though there was no room for the android inside, with the four of us, she had declined to stay behind. "How do you know that?" I asked. "I thought the director was screening her airship from outside signals. When you instructed that the replica be fabricated, I included a suite of microsensors. The data, including ambient sound they collect, is transmitted via entangled particles to a receiver located in your workshop. I scavenged the particle pairs from a set of dual entangled tunnelers from the island's reserve inventory. As long as the replica exists on the air lodge, we can monitor its surroundings." Clever girl. Omu and Naomi were certainly on top of things. We returned our focus to the sightseeing excursion. Ambassador Riho was amazed at the colorful display of aquatic fauna and flora. She indicated that the waters of her homeworld lacked such diversity, owing to a higher concentration of dissolved minerals. I wondered if the Hemru had simply avoided noticing. Limited surface water and having a body form that sank like a stone probably curtailed such underwater adventures of the type we were engaging in now. Supper that night was informal and more intimate. Cassius and Serenity were hosting a cookout down by the guest areas of the island. Hannah and Alec were dining alone in the lower cottage. Since I did not want to attend the guest cookout, I prepared a light supper for myself and Riho at the outdoor kitchen on the rooftop patio. The main course was grilled fresh red snapper. Omu had harpooned a fine specimen using an aquatic drone during our afternoon submarine excursion. I seasoned the fish with crushed chili, garlic, and ginger. As a side, I added a fresh salad with a lemongrass vinaigrette. The Hemru ate a large portion and with a gusto, which I took to mean that she truly enjoyed the meal. Our conversation was varied and, as always, interesting. We also exchanged our individual schedules for the next few days. I relayed that I would be spending the mornings in virtual training with Alec and Hannah. Riho relayed that she would also be in virtual most mornings doing interviews and holding informal gatherings with xenospecialists and other interested scholars. She also intended to spend some time exchanging information with her copy still active in the Simulated Reality Project. Until she reminded me, I'd forgotten that there was another active copy of her mind data. It was the version existing in the simulated actual Hemru alien body type. I'd inquired if she was going to fully merge her mind data with the other copy, but learned that doing so would compromise many of the adaptations her mind had recently made in learning to function as a human. Instead, she was going to spend time with herself in an accelerated format and simply talk. The idea of being locked inside a virtual box with a copy of myself made me shudder. That she looked forward to the session spoke volumes about the differences in our nature. After supper, we took a short walk to the beach to settle our meal and check in with the others. We met up with Serenity and found that we'd have the full evening to ourselves, as she and Cassius would be busy until well after midnight. Hannah and Alec were not at their cottage. A trace revealed that the pair were down at the North Beach landing area, preparing a boat for a night diving excursion out to the reef. We wished them a fun and safe trip and watched as they navigated the narrow, dredged channel through the shallows. We made our way up the trail to my lodge and then, after showering and changing into robes, retired again to the rooftop patio. I fired up the log printer and ignited a small wood bonfire in the large open fire pit. Then, with just the flickering flames and the now fully risen moon providing our only illumination, we sat talking on the lounger. "John, you implied to Director Karn Conlon that you intended to cede control of this world to others after the enemy is defeated. Do you really mean to do that?" she asked quietly. "I think so, Ambassador. I feel it's the right choice," I replied. She remained silent, clearly waiting for a more detailed answer. I can't fully explain it. In my early life, I was more independent than most. I'd thought I was what was known as a libertarian, although I was never sure of exactly what the term meant. I paused, giving the Hemru time to consult with her augment over the ideological backgrounds of the term. When she appeared ready for more, I continued, "I believe in personal freedom more than I do the desire to rule over others. And having that power, I can't help but put myself in the position of those under me. Living under someone holding ultimate authority, even if that person had never acted against me to use it, would still gnaw at me. But if you relinquish your authority and it transfers to the directors, you would still be subject to others having authority over you. the Hemru stated, clearly confused by my explanation. That's true, but it would be a group of people, and I would feel better if those with authority over me gained it by being elected by my peers, I replied. Why do you not simply have an election with yourself as one of the candidates? From what I have observed, you remain quite popular. Most humans appear happy and content with their existence. Would not being elected provide the mandate required to alleviate your concerns about any given human being governed by an individual? That's true, but there would likely be others running against me. I fear dividing humanity at this time. Also, what if I lost? I think I could tolerate being subject to the rule of a governing body, like the directors, but I know I'd chafe over being ruled by a sole individual, I replied. Even if it were by someone as knowledgeable and accomplished as your former wife? Riho asked. She had me there. I would have no problem with Uxay being the sole authority in charge of humanity. The one concern with that thought was that I knew her, and she would not want such authority. No, the people who would want ultimate power were the same ones I'd be uncomfortable living under. Maybe, but I still think that if I give up my power, it will have to be to an elected body of many. At least having a large group with distributed responsibilities would spread the load and maybe limit drastic mistakes? I see. If not your solitary rule, then no one else's, Riho said calmly. Somewhat hypocritical of me, yes, I said. Riho paused with a blank expression, likely learning about that term as well. Eventually, she continued, Still, you have existed as this world's sole authority for centuries. What if you can't handle giving up your power? I deflected her question with a question of my own. The other night, you spoke of your species and how, despite possessing advanced life extension technologies, very few chose to live beyond about 2 of our centuries. Yes, that is correct. We believe that to extend one's life far beyond what our evolution has intended is both unhealthy, mentally, and unnatural, she replied. I am nearly 2.5 centuries old, Riho. That's only counting the years I've been active. I was born over 1,100 years ago. I feel my age deeply sometimes. The alien just looked at me. Her expression was sad, indicating that I had made my point. You will see your world free from the threat of the assemblage? She asked after a moment. Yes, I will at least see that. An hour later, we were lying naked on the lounging pad. I'd introduced the Hemru to the joys of a jetted spa. She had almost cooed at the warmth and sensations of the pulsating jets massaging her body. Now we were lying relaxed, cooling off, and watching the stars silently. Directly overhead was a distinct cutoff in the heavenly display as clouds were sliding in and obscuring the myriad of lights. Off towards the northern horizon, the constant flashes of a distant tropical thunderstorm illuminated a thunderhead that must have pierced the stratosphere. Riho, that storm is coming this way. I do not think we want to fall asleep up here tonight, I said softly. We are familiar with such atmospheric static discharges on my world. I agree we should seek shelter before the storm's arrival. I helped her off the lounging platform and then followed her below. Behind us, the patio mobile units quickly became active, securing the rooftop patio against the coming storm. Omu had gone down to the public areas earlier to assist Serenity and Cassius in seeing that the rest of the island was ready for a night of foul weather. I saw Riho to her quarters and was about to continue on to my own when the ambassador spoke. John, I enjoyed being groomed last night. It gave me comfort and reminded me of when I was around my Hemru partners. I slept well last night and I thank you again. I was about to say, you're welcome, but caught the almost pleading look on her face in the dim hallway lighting. Would you like me to give you another massage, Riho? I almost laughed out loud as the Hemru fidgeted uncomfortably. She must have really enjoyed last night, but was not sure how to ask for the same tonight. I saved her from her plight by grabbing her hand and leading her to her bed. She still looked hesitant as she turned to face me. I know most humans rely on their partners, or rely on their mechanical companions for such things, but I touched her lips to silence her, pulled her bed covering to the floor and pointed. She crawled to the middle without further hesitation, laying on her front with her arms spread. Again, I had to suppress a chuckle as I moved behind her and began to massage her back, shoulders, and upper arms. Soon the ambassador was an audibly sighing puddle as I alternated from lightly kneading her muscles and gently caressing her skin. That That is such an amazing sensation, John, she sighed. This soft-skinned body experiences surface sensations with much greater fidelity than that of the Hemru form. I moved lower and began to massage her legs. I avoided the soles of her feet as she claimed those sensations were intolerable. It appeared the Hemru were ticklish, or at least they were when shelled into human bodies. I moved up and began to work the larger muscles of her upper thighs. Despite the shell's small size, Riho had a perfectly formed petite ass which I could not help but admire. As I pulled and pushed her gluteal muscles, Riho began to squirm slightly. I also noticed that her legs beginning to spread apart. Sure enough, my nostrils flared as I detected the scent of feminine arousal. I felt myself stirring along with the ambassador and moved my hands further away from her intimate areas. At my retreat, her body wiggled, trying to regain contact with my hands. John, I'm not sure what it is I feel. Your body is feeling arousal, Riho, I whispered. Would you like me to stop, or do you wish me to help you achieve the release your body desires? There was a slight pause before she answered. I would like you to continue. I am curious about this release and wish to study it further. I smiled. Curious, my ass. Riho's shell was horny. Her brain was reacting to the flood of hormones. There was little chance that her mentality could resist giving in to such an onslaught of chemicals. I decided to do my best to give her something worthy of study. I repositioned myself so I was off to one side of her body and slowly brought my hand up between her thighs, gently cupping her sex. She was already swollen with arousal as I carefully began rubbing, exposing her most sensitive parts. Soon after, she was panting along with her body as her hips gyrated along with the building sensations. I refrained from penetrating her with my fingers, not sure how the alien would react. I'd figured that intercourse had occurred during Riho's explorations with Cassius, but that would not be needed tonight to give her the pleasure her body sought. I was also still a bit uncomfortable with the two young-looking shells she was currently inhabiting, although as I spent more time in her presence, this personal quirk was subsiding. Before long, Riho's shell reached its climax. I was unable to learn the results of the alien studies, as she was now too busy gently snoring to respond. I removed myself from the bed and carefully covered Riho with the cover. My chore had left me sporting an erection, and I was glad to find Omu waiting outside Riho's bedchamber, carrying a light robe. She had a slight smirk as she offered me the covering. Serenity is still up, having just got in from overseeing the storm preparations for the island. You might want to cover yourself before scaring the children, the android said. I ignored her barb but donned the robe. Down the hall I saw Serenity moving about the kitchen area, likely preparing herself a late snack. She looked up and spotted me before I could turn and make my escape. I decided to face the music and went to say goodnight. Tucking your guests in personally now, eh, Gramps? Serenity quipped as I entered the kitchen area. I ignored her and went to the replicator to fetch a glass of water. Finally, after taking a long, slow drink, I replied to her in my snootiest voice. At Shea Heels, our guest comfort is our ultimate responsibility. She snorted and I could not contain a grin. But rest assured that our guest remains wholesome and unviolated. I simply gave her a massage to help her relax and sleep better, I replied. I caught her glancing at the not quite hidden evidence of my arousal. I'm serious, I said in my defense. Ambassador Riho simply enjoys a good back rub. She says it reminds her of how her species grooms one another. Now Serenity laughed. Oh, I believe you, Grandpa, but it looks like your grooming duties have left you a bit anxious. It's too bad we don't have a touch therapist on staff who could help you get to sleep tonight. I wanted to be offended but had to laugh along with her. Yeah, well, I suppose it's too late to go strolling the beach for any late trolling female guests seeking company. She glanced at the windows, which were now almost constantly illuminated by the lighting show of the nearing storm. No, I think they are all safely tucked into their bungalows for the night. You will have to suffer until tomorrow. We continued to chat while Serenity ate. While we did, the pending storm arrived, making itself known by strong winds and sheets of rain drumming on the windows. As Serenity described the preventative measures she and Cassius had taken, I was reassured that all would be well. My implant indicated that the weatherminder reported that the storm would pass quickly and the island's rescue and repair mobile units were primed for any emergencies. 10 minutes later, I said goodnight and made my escape. Moving down the hall, heading towards the sleeping areas, I spotted a faint, flickering light spilling out of the partially open bedroom door. Omu must have gone on ahead while I'd been speaking with Serenity. I also heard mechanical noises and was curious what she was up to, hoping it was not some prank poking fun at my earlier arousal. Fearing the worst, I stepped into my bedroom, but stopped suddenly in surprise. At the far side of the room, just beyond the bed, hovered an active wormhole portal. A compact transport cylinder had just emerged and was beginning to open as I watched. I recognized the cylinder as the one from Naomi's submarine, Currencia. I was about to call Naomi to find out what was going on when the opening hatch revealed a naked woman. What the hell? The woman's tightly shut eyes popped open and locked on me. John, it worked! Oh my God, that was so much fun! Angelina, I sputtered, although I already knew who the woman was. It was my old friend, the touch therapist Angelina Pelbaraza. What are you doing here? She squeezed out of the cylinder and stretched, my eyes immediately drawn to her perfectly formed breasts and long-toned abdomen. Ask your crazy android. She set this up. Behind her, the cylinder retracted into the wormhole suspended near the ceiling. The portal winked out of existence, and I brought my gaze back to my beautiful friend. Omu, I asked, unable to divert my attention to scan the room for the android. The android's response came via my implants. Surprise, John. Relax and enjoy your treat. Miss Barraza's schedule had a sudden opening, and Naomi indicated Currencia had the power reserves available. I've commissioned the touch therapist's services for the full week. During her stay, Miss Barraza will work with Ambassador Riho as well. Despite my shock, I was able to grasp the last. Angie's knowledge might be good for Riho. Well, John, I have to say this is a first for me, Angie said with a sultry voice. I've had sudden, urgent requests before, but nothing like this. She raised her arms theatrically and slowly spun in place. As you can see, I just finished bathing when Omu contacted me. I appreciated her display. If anything, she was now in even better shape and looked even sexier than she had when we first met 3 years ago. I did not respond other than reach behind me and close the bedroom door. I let my robe slip to the floor as I went to Angelina and greeted my friend with a deep hug. She was able to feel my growing excitement. When we broke apart, Angie glanced down to verify what she had felt. Her smile grew as she whispered, I see it was an emergency. Maybe I'll be able to claim emergency response certifications after this little adventure. I just shook my head and pulled her after me to the bed. I'd missed her, and I was still charged up from the earlier events with Riho. I was still not quite sure what to think about my artificial companion's actions in bringing Angelina here tonight, but that could wait until tomorrow. Right now, I was just appreciative that they understood me as well as they did,